right. Again, I apologize for the delay in getting this lecture to you. Some technical difficulties, so I'm recording it from home. But this will be the official start of the material for this course. So lecture exam 1 material will begin here with what's entitled lecture 2. If you're wondering, lecture 1 was just the introductory stuff that we went over last Saturday. So in its very basic form, we talk about what do the words anatomy and physiology mean. The word anatomy is concerned with the form or the structure of something. The word physiology is concerned with the function of it. Doesn't care about what it looks like, how it was formed, any of that. Physiology only is concerned with the function. If we were a physiologist, we would say that form follows function, meaning that the function of whatever we're talking about came first, and then the form was afterwards. If we were a die-hard anatomist, we would say that the form was first and that function follows form. Can we say that one is correct and one is incorrect? No, neither is correct. The only thing we can say is that structure and form complement each other. Function and form complement each other. You cannot have one without the other. For instance, females have the uterus for bearing children, for growing them internally. Now, did females have a need to bear children first? Did they have the function first, so they were equipped with a uterus? Or did females have a uterus first and therefore arose the function of bearing the children? We don't know. We have no way of knowing which one came first. We only know that they complement one another. Within anatomy, there are hundreds of subdisciplines. What's listed here on this slide are just a few of them. Gross anatomy is what can be seen with the naked eye. That's what the word gross implies. That's what we're going to spend the majority of the semester talking about, gross anatomy, surface anatomy. Now, gross anatomy can be taught in one of two ways, regional or systemic. You will be learning systemic anatomy, meaning systems. We are going to do the skeletal system, and then the muscular system, then the nervous system, and you get into 202, the systems will continue. Regional anatomy breaks the body into seven different regions: head, neck, back, upper limb, lower limb, thorax, abdomen, pelvis. Okay? That's systemic anatomy. And when you are, that's regional anatomy. And when you are in a region, you study the bones, the muscles, the blood vessels, any structure in that region. And then you move on to the next region. At the end of a regional anatomy class and at the end of a systemic anatomy class, you have the exact same information. So one's not better than the other. It's just two different ways of teaching the same information. Microscopic anatomy, which we will spend the beginning of the semester looking at, is the study of structures too small to be seen with the naked eye. We need a microscope. Histology is the study of tissues, and that's what we're going to concern ourselves with. But you can get on an even smaller level than histology with cytology. Cytology is the study of individual cells. A cytologist would be concerned with something like telling the difference between a normal, healthy cell and a cancerous cell. Another subdiscipline within anatomy is developmental anatomy. Developmental anatomists study the structures as they develop from an embryo into a fetus, from young age to adulthood. For instance, your heart actually begins its journey in front of your face. Okay? When you are developing as an embryo, the tissue that becomes your heart starts in front of what you know now as your face, and it migrates down into your chest. Several of the structures that are in their place in adulthood did not begin there when you were an embryo. So that's what developmental anatomists look at, how things grow and change over time. If you are a physiologist, you tend to specialize into a subdiscipline by a specific organ system. For instance, a renal physiologist is concerned with the functioning of the kidney. Renal is kidney. A neurophysiologist is looking at neurons. Cardiovascular physiology is looking at the heart and blood vessels. I had to put reproductive physiology in there. That's what I studied in college. And even within these organ systems, Physiologists tend to further specialize. For instance, in reproductive physiology, you tend to choose one sex or the other. You study just the male or just the female reproductive physiology. The other thing I want to bring up about physiology is that it shares a root word with the word physics, okay? And that is not a coincidence. If you were to take a physics and a physiology class close together, you would notice a lot of things because, for instance, electrical currents that govern the laws that govern electrical currents in the wires in the wall, same laws that govern the electrical currents that fire in your neurons. Blood pressure is governed by the same laws as water pressure, as air pressure, as any other pressure. The movement, the principles of movement that allow your car to get you here in the morning are the same principles that govern the movement within your body. So physics and physiology share a root word, and that is not a coincidence. This slide illustrates the structural organization of your body. Your body is highly organized, and we can go from the smallest level, which is the chemical level. This slide illustrates the structural organization of your body. Your body is highly organized, and we can go from the smallest level, which is the chemical level, to the largest level, which is an organism. You are an organism. This is a very vague flowchart of those levels. As we progress into some of the farther lectures, we're going to make this organization much more specific. But for the time being, I want to illustrate that on the smallest level, you are made up of chemicals and atoms. Okay? Atoms come together to make molecules, chemicals. Chemicals will organize themselves into cells. That puts us on the cellular level. Cells will organize themselves into tissues, tissues into organs, organs into organ systems, and finally, if we take all of the organ systems, we will get an organism. Every level is dependent on the level that comes before. We cannot remove the tissues in your body and expect to still have organs, organ systems, and organisms. If you remove one layer, if you think you can take one thing out of your body, the whole organization will collapse. This is just a visual representation of what we were just talking about. Here's the chemical level. We have our atoms and our molecules. They're organizing themselves into cells. In this instance, a smooth muscle cell. Smooth muscle cells will come together to make up smooth muscle tissue. Several types of tissues, smooth muscle being one of them, will come together to make an organ. In this case, a blood vessel. Blood vessels will combine with the heart to make an organ system, the cardiovascular system. And if we combine all the organ systems, we will get an organism. This is a laundry list of major organs and their systems. Okay? We're going to go over each one individually. The first one is the integumentary system. Okay? This is mainly comprised of your skin. Okay, your skin is the largest component of the integumentary system. It covers your body, it protects you, it helps you to synthesize vitamin D. Okay, and we will see once we begin to talk about the integumentary system in a later lecture that hair and nails are derivatives of the cells and tissues of the skin. Okay, so the skin actually gives rise to the hair and nails. The skeletal system consists of bones and joints. These are there for protection and support of your body. And I do want to go ahead and define joints because most people associate joints with movement. The strict definition of joint is where two bones meet. Okay, I did not say anything about movement. Some joints do have movement, other joints do not. When you think about the bones in your legs, they meet so that you can have a knee joint, but you also have several bones meeting in your face and your skull. There is no movement at those joints. So the word joint does not imply movement. It only implies that two bones meet. The muscular system, for the intent and purposes of this lecture, we're going to include skeletal muscles. You have several different types of muscle in your body that we will examine during histology, But for this lecture, we're going to say that the muscular system is composed of skeletal muscles. And based on the last slide, we know that skeletal muscles must associate with bones and joints. That's why they're called skeletal muscles. And while that seems like very much common sense, it is an important distinction to make because skeletal muscle is the only muscle in your body that does in fact associate with bones and joints. The lymphatic system is your body's defense. It's the system that affords you protection from all of the foreign invaders, all of the bacteria and viruses that try to come into your body every day. It consists of the red bone marrow, which produces cells, the thymus, which is glandular tissue that lies over the heart, lymphatic vessels. Okay, and what lymphatic vessels are is we're all familiar with our blood vessels. Almost everywhere you have a blood vessel, you also in your body have a lymphatic vessel, and it's the highway that transports your immune system, your lymphatic system, from place to place. The reason it says green in parentheses is because anatomical illustrations have a universal color code. So any hand-drawn anatomical picture, if you see colored lines on it, they correspond to certain structures. Red are always arteries, blue are always veins, green are always lymphatic vessels, and yellow are always nerves. So as we look to the picture on the right-hand side of the screen and we see all the green lines, those are illustrating lymphatic ducts, and only a very few of them are illustrated. Like I said, almost everywhere you have a blood vessel, you have a lymphatic vessel. The spleen resides on the left side of the body, and it's a warehouse of sorts. Okay? A lot of your immune cells that protect you like to hang out in the spleen. The spleen is also responsible for helping to filter your red blood cells that carry oxygen for you. And lastly, you have your lymph nodes. Your lymph nodes are enlargement along the lymphatic vessels, and they also serve as a type of warehouse. During times when you are battling illness, some of your cells will go into your lymph nodes in order to multiply. That's what makes them swell. So the next time you get a sore throat and the lymph nodes under your jaw swell up, it's not because your lymph nodes are infected, but because you are fighting infection and your own cells have gone to your lymph nodes to multiply. The respiratory system allows us to breathe, which brings oxygen into the blood and expels carbon dioxide. It consists of the nasal cavity, which is a hollow space behind your nostrils, your pharynx, which is the back of your throat, your larynx, which is where your voice box is, your trachea, which is a single tube that descends down into your chest. Your trachea branches into what are called bronchi or bronchus. Bronchus is the singular, so if I'm only talking about the branch that goes to the right lung, I'd be talking about the right bronchus. If I want to talk about the branches that go to the right and the left lungs, I would call them bronchi. And then you finally have the lungs. So you have the nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, lung, and bronchi. The digestive system, we need to bring in external foodstuffs and break them down in order to extract energy. The oral cavity is your mouth. As you swallow food, it passes into your esophagus. From your esophagus, it's passed into your small intestine. From the small intestine into the large intestine. And by the time it reaches the large intestine, if your body has been unable to break it down to extract energy from it, it then becomes solid waste, which is expelled through the rectum and the anus. Now, the liver is listed on here, and the liver is a part of the digestive system. It is considered an accessory to digestion because it provides secretions which are essential for healthy digestion in the stomach and small intestine. The nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord, which are part of the central nervous system, and then the majority of the nerves in your body come from the spinal cord. That's called the peripheral nervous system. A handful of nerves come directly from the brain itself, and we have another universal color code marked here with yellow. Any anatomical drawing that is attempting to illustrate nerves, those nerves should be drawn in yellow. The endocrine system is your hormonal system. So anytime you think hormones, you think hormone secretion, that is under the control of the endocrine system. Now, when we say hormone, most people think of the sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. But really, there are lots and lots of hormones. There are hormones that balance your blood sugar for you, insulin and glucagon. Hormones that balance your metabolism, that's thyroid hormone. Lots of hormones out there. If there was a president of the endocrine system, it would be the hypothalamus. It's a small region in the brain that is in control of the entire endocrine system. If the hypothalamus is the president, the pituitary gland is the vice president. The hypothalamus issues a command, it gives it to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland will give it to the rest of the body. The pineal gland is also in the brain. It helps regulate your sleep-wake cycles. The thyroid gland is around your larynx, and that helps control your metabolism. Your adrenal glands sit above your kidneys. Ad means upon, renal means kidney, so the word adrenal actually means right on top of the kidney, which is where they're located. They are responsible for producing adrenaline and noradrenaline, which have changed their names to epinephrine and norepinephrine. And finally, you have your pancreas. Your pancreas aids in digestion and also the balancing of your blood sugar by secreting insulin and glucagon. On the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, ovary and testes are listed in the picture. And that's not wrong. They are part of the endocrine system, but for the purposes of this lecture and for testing, I want you to include ovary and testes under their respective reproductive systems. The cardiovascular system is the heart, the arteries, and the veins. Again, universal color code tells us that the arteries should be colored red and the veins should be colored blue. So on one of the slides, you have all the universal color codes. Lymphatic vessels are green, nerves are yellow, arteries are red, veins are blue. The urinary system is responsible for excreting the liquid waste that comes from filtering your blood. Your kidneys are the organ responsible for filtering the blood. And just to give you an idea how important your kidneys are to you, they filter the entire liquid portion of your blood 60 times every day. So your kidneys are absolutely essential to healthy physiology. When the kidneys filter the waste products out of the blood, the waste products travel down the ureters. There's one ureter coming from each kidney, and they lead to the urinary bladder, which is a simple storage compartment for the liquid waste urine, until you're ready to expel it outside the body, which it will leave through the single urethra. The male reproductive system includes the penis, testicles, and accessory sex glands. These are just some of the structures of the male reproductive system. Again, I want testicles or testes and ovaries included under male and female reproductive system respectively. The one thing you can't forget in the female reproductive system is that the mammary glands qualify as a female reproductive organ. They are tied into and controlled by the female reproductive axis. The ovaries are the female equivalent of the testes. There is no male equivalent to the uterus, and then finally the vagina. Again, these are just some of the female reproductive system structures. So, now that we've gone over all the organ systems, we know that we put all the organ systems together to make an organism, that every cell, every tissue, every organ is dependent on another one. Organ systems cannot work in isolation. I can't pull your liver out of your body and plop it on a table and expect your liver to stay alive on the table and you to stay alive without your liver. All the organ systems work together. Now that we've got our organ systems together, how do we maintain life? And by life, we want to qualify that by saying that we are a complex animal. The list of characteristics on this slide is not a list of things that you need to be considered alive. The list of things on this slide are characteristics of a complex animal, and we're going to go over each one individually. Maintaining boundaries. This is something every living organism has to have. Every living organism must maintain its boundaries. Something must make you separate from your environment. Your external environment has to be separate from your internal environment. On humans, organisms, it's our skin. Our skin is the membrane that separates the inside of us from the outside. Okay? It is a membrane that also allows me to communicate with my external environment. I can sense when it's hot, when it's cold, when it's wet, when it's dry, when somebody's pinching my skin and I'm in pain. I can communicate with my environment very well through my skin. Not only do I have an organismal boundary, but I can have a boundary on every level. Okay? Your organs are separate from one another. Your tissues are separate from one another. Your cells, your cell organelles. Carbon is separate from nitrogen. Okay? It can go all the way down to the atomic level, from the largest to the smallest level. Everywhere along there, you have boundaries. Movement. Complex animals are capable of movement. Not only as an organism can I propel myself through my environment, but even as I sit here still, there's movement going on. My blood is moving through my blood vessels. My food that I had for dinner is moving through my digestive tract. Okay, there's movement even when as an organism I'm sitting still. Movement is still going on. So when you look at these characteristics of a complex animal, do not just limit them just to the organismal level. Many of them go throughout all the levels that we talked about during structural organization. The one thing you can't get hung up on is the fact that movement does not define life. There are many things that move that aren't alive. For instance, cars. Okay, cars move. They move through their environments. Are they alive? No. So movement does not define life. Responsiveness. Organisms should be able to respond to their environment. We would be very hard-pressed to survive if we could not respond to our environment. If something is causing us pain, we must be able to stop it. You have very strong involuntary reactions to pain that put you in a position to try and make the pain stop. Changes in your environment should cause a response by you as an organism. Some of those responses are outward. As if it's hot outside, you start sweating. That's an obvious response. Some responses are not so obvious to you, like carbon dioxide levels. Carbon dioxide levels in your blood determine your breathing rate. When carbon dioxide levels rise, you tend to breathe faster. When carbon dioxide levels drop, you breathe slower. So we tend to take our breathing rate for granted. As you're sitting here listening to this lecture, you may think your breathing is very rhythmical and constant, when in fact it's constantly speeding up and slowing down, and that's a response to carbon dioxide levels. Digestion. Again, as a complex animal, we are unable to make our own energy. We must take in external material to provide fuel for our body. Humans are fueled by carbon. It doesn't matter what you eat, your body's going after the carbon. Carbon as in carbohydrates. This is why carbohydrates will always be at the bottom of the food pyramid as the food source that you should eat the most of. Your body loves carbohydrates, which are sugars. Whether they are complex or simple, when they come into your body, they are broken down into very small units, distributed through the blood to different organs, tissues, and cells. The cells will eventually take the sugars, combine it with oxygen, and produce energy for you. So in order for your body to maintain itself, it must produce energy. In order for you to get energy, you have to have a constant supply of carbon and oxygen. Metabolism. Okay, when we say the word metabolism, most people associate it with just breaking things down. If I eat a piece of bread, I'll say, how fast can I metabolize it, inferring how fast can I break it down. But that's only one half of metabolism. Metabolism encompasses every single chemical reaction in your body. And we can break those reactions into two categories. You're either breaking it down or building something. If you are breaking it down, that's called catabolism. Okay? If you catabolize something or you have a catabolic reaction, you're breaking something down. So if I do eat that piece of bread and I break it down into its simple sugars for my cells, that's catabolic. The opposite is to build something. That's anabolic. If I want to build a protein, if I want to build a cell, if I want to build a tissue, that requires anabolism. An anabolic reaction is one that leads to the building of something, putting something together. Therefore, we could say that metabolism consists of every catabolic reaction plus every anabolic reaction, or metabolism equals catabolism plus anabolism. Since a lot of this relies on energy, we shouldn't find it surprising that metabolism relies heavily on respiratory and digestive system. That's what's providing us our oxygen and our carbon. It's also going to be regulated by hormones. As you'll see, most systems in your body are regulated by hormones. Excretion. You have three types of waste products in your body: a gas, a liquid, and a solid. Okay? When we talked about making energy, when you take oxygen and you combine it with carbon, you get energy, but you also get a waste product. That waste product is carbon dioxide. That's why you inhale oxygen and you exhale carbon dioxide. The liquid waste in your body is produced when the kidneys filter the blood, and that's urine. The solid waste from your body is produced when the foodstuffs you eat are unable to be broken down into their simple units. They end up in the large intestine and they are expelled as feces. You must be able to rid yourself of non-useful substances. Toxicity and death can occur if even one of these waste products is unable to be expelled. Carbon dioxide, you've got about 5 minutes. Okay? If you are unable to expel carbon dioxide and take in oxygen, you will not survive long. Urine and feces, obviously a little bit longer, but without expelling these waste products, toxicity continues to build up in your body and will cause a great deal of harm. Reproduction. Okay? When we say the word reproduction, most of us jump right to having a baby. Okay? That is one type of reproduction. It can occur on a cellular or organismal level. Having a baby is organismal reproduction. We are making an entirely new organism. But it can also happen on the cellular level. Cells can divide, making identical daughter cells, and that happens a lot for repair and growth. If I cut myself, I'm losing blood, I'm losing tissue, I'm losing skin, cells, and all of that is going to need to be repaired. And that would be an example of cellular reproduction. Again, organismal reproduction is making a whole new organism. In complex animals, the job of making a whole new organism is divided between male and female. That's not true of all living organisms. Many living organisms are able to just clone themselves and make a copy. But complex animals must have a male and a female present. The division of labor, which means the work that needs to be done, is what makes reproductive organs different. Again, it's a chicken and an egg. Do females have the uterus because we're bearing the children, or did we have the need to bear the children first and then we got the uterus? Okay, we don't know, but what we do know is that the reproductive organs are different, and so therefore the job of what goes into making a new organism are different for males and females. Growth happens in one of two ways. Okay? It can happen through something called hyperplasia or hypertrophy. Hyperplasia means making more cells. And a good example of this is your liver. It's one of the few organs in your body actually capable of true hyperplasia. You can lose a great portion of your liver, up to 75% of your liver, and if 25% is still intact, it will make new cells and grow back the rest of the liver that was lost. That's an example of hyperplasia. Hypertrophy means taking the cells that are left and making them bigger. This is how bodybuilding works when you lift weights to get bigger. Okay? The muscle cells, the number of muscle cells you're born with is the number of muscle cells you'll die with, okay, barring any injuries. So how do you get from being small to being large like a bodybuilder? What bodybuilders are doing is causing their muscle cells to hypertrophy or enlarge their size. Another example of hypertrophy is the female ovary. If I go into a female and I take away half her ovary, will she lose half her estrogen? And the answer is no, because the remaining 50% of the cells that are still intact will enlarge themselves. They will hypertrophy and begin making twice as much estrogen. So growth, the increase in body size or part of an organism, happens through either hyperplasia or hypertrophy. Okay, we've seen what it takes to be a complex animal. We have all our organ systems in place. Now we want to know, what do we need in order to survive? There are 5 things you need. Some of them seem very common sense, others maybe not so obvious. Nutrients, oxygen, water, temperature, pressure. Nutrients, again, we've said this before. You cannot make your own energy. You must take in external foodstuffs in order to provide the nutrients your body needs. And there are 5 nutrients your body needs every day. Carbohydrates, that's your body's favorite. Vitamins and minerals help with a lot of chemical reactions. Proteins and fats. Okay, fats are on there. There are good fats, and fat is a part of a balanced diet. All 5 of those must be taken in for healthy physiology. Water, okay? 60 to 80% of your entire body weight is water. You are mostly water, and that's going to become important as we begin to talk about your physiology on a cellular level. Water is the single most abundant chemical in the body. Okay? Nothing appears in your body more than water. You gain it through both food and liquid. Okay? Even if you don't go to the bathroom all day long, you still lose water. Okay? The inside of your respiratory system has to stay moist. The inside of your mouth has to stay moist. But air is still going to pass through, and you're going to lose water through evaporation. If you sweat or cry, you can lose it through excretion. Okay? The water that your body needs, it's able to hold on to 99% of it. It's losing that 1% through evaporation and excretion. But for the water it needs, it's able to hold on to 99%. Oxygen, of course, we've talked about this. Oxygen's very, very important. Okay? You get about 5 minutes to live without oxygen. It is absolutely necessary for life, again, because energy is necessary for life. In order for your body to make energy, you must have carbon and oxygen. When the body is low on oxygen, there's a term to describe it, and that term is hypoxic. The first part of that word, hypo, means low. And then you have oxic, which means oxygen. So hypoxic is when you have oxygen, but not enough. You are low on oxygen. Cells can go only maybe 5 minutes maximum without oxygen. The air that we breathe is actually only about 20% oxygen. There are lots of gases in the air. There's carbon dioxide. Oxygen, of course, we've talked about this. Oxygen's very, very important. Okay? You get about 5 minutes to live without oxygen. It is absolutely necessary for life, again, because energy is necessary for life. In order for your body to make energy, you must have carbon and oxygen. When the body is low on oxygen, there's a term to describe it, and that term is hypoxic. The first part of that word, hypo, means low. And then you have oxic, which means oxygen. So hypoxic is when you have oxygen but not enough. You are low on oxygen. Cells can go only maybe 5 minutes maximum without oxygen. The air that we breathe is actually only about 20% oxygen. There are lots of gases in the air. There's carbon dioxide, nitrogen gas, hydrogen gas, helium gas. This is all in our air. It's only about 20% oxygen. So it's so essential to you, but it doesn't even make up the majority of the air that you breathe. Temperature is one we don't think about a lot, but you can only survive at certain temperatures. Your body temperature is directly related to metabolic rate. They affect each other. If your metabolism is high, your body temperature tends to be high. If your metabolism is low, your body temperature tends to be low. And the opposite effect is true. If I go outside and I let my body temperature drop very low, it slows down all my metabolic rates. If I raise my body temperature, it tends to speed up my metabolic rates. So a fluctuation in one causes a fluctuation in the other. Now, fluctuations in temperature, either too high or too low, can both be detrimental. Your absolute limit for survival on the high end is about 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, at 109, you are doing a world of damage to your body, but you're still alive. If you go any higher, you'll die. If you go too low, what happens is your metabolism, all your reactions that create energy for you, slow down too slow. You don't get enough energy, and that's also detrimental. Humans are what we call homeothermic organisms. The word homeo or homo means same. Thermic is your temperature. You are able to maintain your body temperature of 98.6 no matter what the external environment is, okay? It doesn't matter if the room you're sitting in is 102 or 60 degrees. If I took your temperature, it'll be 98.6. You have a furnace and an air conditioner. Your skeletal muscles generate your heat. That's your furnace. That's why anytime you start to exercise, you sweat, because you've turned on the furnace. That also brings your air conditioner. When your body heats up, your air conditioning is sweating. That's what cools you down. Pressure is the last survival need, and it's the one that we really don't think about, but you can only survive at a certain pressure. Atmospheric pressure is the force generated on the surface of your body by air. So there are hundreds of miles of air between the top of your head and space. And all of that air, well, we don't think that air weighs anything. When you're talking about hundreds of miles of air, it does weigh something. And that weight on top of the surface of your body is absolutely necessary in order to get oxygen from your lungs into your blood. Too much pressure, and a place where you could go where there would be too much pressure is under the water, okay? Because now not only do we have hundreds of miles of air on your head, but now we're adding water, and water's much heavier than air. Too much pressure will collapse your lungs and prevent any gas exchange. Too little pressure, as in going to high altitudes, going to Colorado, to Denver, to Mount Everest, okay, will not provide enough pressure to force oxygen into your blood. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about in this lecture is what's called homeostasis. Again, homeo or homo means same, and stasis is without change. So the definition is the first bullet point here. It's a dynamic process that enables your body to maintain balanced conditions in the face of internal and external change. Again, we gave that example of body temperature a few slides ago. It doesn't matter whether the room is 60 degrees or 100 degrees. You're balanced. You're 98.6. You are homo, the same, stasis, no change, 98.6. Your blood sugar is the same. It doesn't matter if you just had a big meal or it's been 5 hours since you've eaten. Your blood glucose is going to stay the same. Blood pressure, blood volume, always operate the same way. The only tricky word to all of this in the definition is dynamic. And the reason dynamic is in there is because if I charted your body temperature throughout the day, let me just get a little pointer, it would actually look something like this, okay? It would be small changes all day long. And we're talking about small changes. Maybe at your low point, you're 98.4, and at your high point, you're 98.8. 98.4, 98.8, on and on through the day. But if I take the average of all those fluctuations, I'll still get 98 there we go, 0.6, okay? That will be your body temperature. That's your balance, okay? It's just like the thermostat in your house. Sure, you set it at 70. Is your house ever really 70 degrees all day? No. The sun comes in the windows, it heats up, the air conditioner kicks on, cools it down. Air conditioner kicks off, house heats back up, air conditioner kicks back on, cools the house down. Your body operates the same way. There are two types of systems by which your body is able to control most of the processes. What's called negative feedback and positive feedback. There are two types of systems by which your body is able to control most of the processes. What's called negative feedback and positive feedback, okay? Again, the thermostat, body temperature, great example. Mechanisms in your body have to be able to start and stop things. What I'll talk about is negative feedback. Okay, negative feedback is the most popular way of controlling things in your body. We're going to read through this definition once together, and it's going to sound like gibberish, and then I'm going to go through and give you an example that'll make it a little bit more concrete. So the definition of negative feedback is a system in which an increase or decrease in the variable being regulated brings about responses that tend to move that variable in the direction opposite, which is why we call it negative feedback, opposite the direction of the original change. Okay? I know it might sound a little crazy, but here's how you break that down. Let's do body temperature. So a system in which an increase or decrease in the variable is body temperature. So if we increase or decrease your body temperature, it's going to bring about responses that move body temperature in the opposite direction of the original change. Or a decrease in body temperature leads to responses that increase body temperature. Those are opposites. That's why we call it negative feedback. And vice versa. An increase in body temperature would lead to responses that decrease body temperature. Okay? If you jump on the treadmill, your muscles create heat in your body. So what do? You sweat. That's the response that leads to a decrease in your body temperature. Negative feedback is the most common regulatory feedback mechanism. 99% of the processes in your body that need controlling are controlled by negative feedback. Again, it can occur on any level. The organ, the cell level, molecular level. You'll talk about it the most when you're talking about the hormones of the endocrine system, but it's not limited to that system. These are very well understood mechanisms. That means scientists have studied them extensively. We know why they start. We know why they stop. We know how they start and stop. We can control them with drugs. We can manipulate them. Okay? They keep many things in check. If you go reading about negative feedback in the textbook or online or another resource, you'll see the following words: variable, receptor, control center, and effector. Okay, we've talked about these words, we just didn't call them by these names. The variable is whatever you're looking at. Okay, it's body temperature, it's blood glucose, it's whatever you're looking at. The receptor is how your body perceives that information. In your body, you have things called thermoreceptors. These are receptors that can constantly sense your body temperature. The control center is almost always your brain. Okay, and then the effector is what your body did to bring about a change. If we're talking about body temperature, this is sweating or shivering. Okay, you did one or the other. That's the effector. These are two flow charts to help illustrate negative feedback. So the one on the left that we'll start with is an organismal example. So if we begin, somebody decreases, which is the down arrow, somebody decreases the room temperature. that increases the amount of heat that you lose from your body. Losing heat from the body causes a decrease in your body temperature. Once your body temperature drops, your body will respond in the following ways. The blood vessels of the skin will constrict or close down. You curl up into a ball, or you will hunch your shoulders over. And what those two responses do is they decrease the amount of heat lost from your body to the environment. And then also you may begin shivering. Shivering causes an increase in heat production. Decreasing heat loss and increasing heat production both will help return the body temperature towards its original value. So we originally had a decrease in body temperature, and we did things to increase body temperature. The example on the right-hand side of the screen is a molecular example. We have a substrate, which is a starting material. Okay, the substrate runs into enzyme A, which converts the substrate into inactive intermediate 1. Inactive intermediate 1 runs into enzyme B, which converts it to inactive intermediate 2, which runs into enzyme C, and enzyme C finally makes it into an active product that your body can actually use. Now, as active product is produced, it will come back, and that's the minus sign, it will come back and negatively affect enzyme A, thereby shutting this whole pathway down. If you want to plug in a real-life example, we can think of something like cholesterol. Cholesterol is needed in your body in order to make any steroid hormone, like testosterone or estrogen. So cholesterol would be our substrate. It needs to encounter all these enzymes and go through all these changes before it can be turned into testosterone. Once it is turned into testosterone, it will go back and negatively inhibit enzyme A. So what would happen is, as it's being produced, you're seeing a buildup in testosterone. It shuts itself off. You metabolize that testosterone and the levels drop. Once the levels drop, you can no longer inhibit enzyme A, and the whole chain starts over again. Again, if I charted the levels, they would go like this all day long, that homeostatic feed. Okay? Levels are low, substrate goes to active product. Active product is high, it shuts itself off, and then you metabolize it and it drops. And then you make it again and it shuts off and then it drops. And then you make it again and then it shuts off and it drops down. So no matter what we look at in your body, it will usually take this pattern if we were to chart it out. Positive feedback is a system that is much less common than negative feedback. Very few things are controlled by positive feedback because positive feedback is an acceleration of a process. It leads to an explosive system. Scientists have a very hard time understanding what starts positive feedback, what stops positive feedback, how to control it, how to manipulate it. It's much more difficult. Some of the best examples of positive feedback are labor and giving birth, as well as ovulation. The easiest one for most people to think about is labor, a woman giving birth. Okay? We still do not know what the very initial signal is that causes a woman to go into labor. Okay? Can we manipulate it? Yes. Can we 100% completely control labor and birth? No. The best we can do is manipulate it. Sometimes we can speed it up or start it. Sometimes we can slow it down or stop it. But it's not 100%. Okay? So, what is labor? The very first thing that causes labor causes a uterine contraction. The uterus is a large